Now this is the court of the Gentiles. Now who makes buildings that look like this other than these people? Now consider a regular processor or CPU. Now this of course looks like one of that we have, but think a positive and negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, all through this, and what kind of energetic field it would make. Now look at Solomon's temple here. Now we even use this as a grounding symbol today in our modern diagrams. But think of this as a thermoelectric capacitor or generator with the thermoelectric legs, okay? Or the whole plant, Giza star generator or Sphinx star generator being a geothermo hydroelectrostatic power plant, because it uses everything in a circle and it uses nature, and there's no waste or entropy at all. And if there is any entropy, it's used. The heat reduction is used as energy. Now think of this: positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, all the way around it. And here this says arc. Okay, this would be a spark. Of course, this would be some kind. Obviously, I believe the Ark of the Covenant was a condenser, a capacitor, and I'll get to that here in just a few. But this looks just like a circuit or a semiconductor that we use today. And I believe these were just on a giant scale to harness power and make these people gods, or float on magic carpets like Solomon had. But I'd say most generally it was electromagnetism or just magnetism of a sort. And 10 shows up a lot. And if you have a smaller pyramid on the inside, but just turned the opposite way, like you have the Pyramid of Giza, or the pyramids facing north, south, east, and west. Now, if you have a smaller one on the inside facing north, northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest, then you will have 8 sides in a pyramid. So you would have 10 points. And you see 10 and 5 run parallel with each other in a lot of the structures. All right, Stonehenge, the wheels inside wheels that Ezekiel saw, the positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, all the way around. Okay, look at this. Now, positive, negative, positive, negative. When you have these polar fields, then you're going to have an electromagnetic field. And eventually, you'll be able to harness this. Well, basically, you're harnessing it now. And it's funny that all of these megalithic stones actually have some kind of polarity to them, which indicates to me that this is the situation. Now, Roman numerals, ironically, the thermoelectric generator, Roman numeral 2. That's just ironic to me, and we'll get to something that's very, very ironic here in just a second. But we use the Seebeck effect. And every way we know how to create energy from the earth, they use, and we see this in the pyramid structures today. Now see, this looks like the Wardenclyffe Tower, or Tesla's tower that he was building. Now, and this would be the sun, or a star, or a plasma ball, however you want to consider it. But this was used to transfer stones, or the avenue that they used to transfer heavy blocks to build the pyramids. Now, ironically, I made a machine, I designed a little machine, or just did a diagram that creates a star, more or less, just like the pyramids do. And it's a basic, simple structure, and ironically, it looks like a scepter, or like this. So here it is. Now, basically, all it is an electron gun that creates antimatter. It shoots it into a capacitor. The capacitor arcs and lights up ionized gases with a magnetic field around it, and it creates a star. And if you don't do this right, or you don't have the magnetic field, because these gases are diamagnetic, which means in the magnetic field they compress, okay? If you don't have that magnetic field, you're going to end up making an explosion. You're going to blow something up, and that's why we see these blown up pyramids. Now, when you shoot the electrons through the quartz, you're creating positronium. And once this positronium charges this with an anti-spark and it lights, you're getting an antimatter spark, which is a lot of energy. See, they'll have to harness the star with a magnetic field right here to keep it from blowing up in the king's chamber. Now, the pyramids of Giza are socket 9131, which is pretty amazing, like I said. This is a socket AM2. Now, you can lift this and pull the CPU out. This is the socket right here. This is the bottom of the CPU. Apparently, the bottom of a pyramid must look similar to this, because there's sockets that are open and no pyramid sitting on them. Or see, these basically like plasma balls. See, it's just too coincidental. I mean, I cannot believe that what we have found in all of these discoveries and all of this evidence doesn't hold up in court of law, when any time in our society this stuff would be evidence in a court of law. Now, most of the people that do all of this, like the Egyptian or the Egyptologists, or people that study this stuff, most generally they're experts in maybe one or two fields, but they don't necessarily have knowledge from many other fields. And I've been building computers for over 20 years and studying cosmology for nearly 20 years and the ancients, and I've put a lot of stuff together. Because I consider everything but believe nothing unless it makes sense. And if it fits in place like a puzzle, then I can't deny it. And no one else should really either, because it's holding us back from progressing like we should. Now, these sites on the 33rd parallel, or the old equator basically, are 6,666 kilometers apart. And if you do that by times 12, you get the circumference of the Earth. Now, times 12, you consider each one of these represents one of the zodiac symbols. And if you have a star on one side of the planet, you're going to have one on the other side of the planet to equal out the magnetic field, or you're going to throw the planet's magnetism off. You're going to screw up the magnetosphere. And I think that's what happened. I think this thing actually caused a cataclysm. And that's why the power has been suppressed for thousands and thousands of years, so it doesn't happen again. That's why this has been hidden from us. Yeah, this here. I was watching some Graham Hancock documentaries, because he's definitely on the right track. He's a genius. He knows what he's talking about. And this put it into perspective. This represents today and tomorrow, or yesterday and today, however you want to consider. But if it represents those time frames, you would have to have one on each side of the planet. And this would be a depiction of the sun, obviously. But consider this Earth, or representing Earth and the sun. All right, now we'll get to the molecular geometry. Now, 369, like Tesla was talking about. Okay, now I'm sure he knew and he figured this stuff out. All right, I'm almost certain he did. Now, consider water has a memory and it reacts to certain stimulus and it creates geometric shapes, beautiful geometric shapes, I might add. And most generally, they're hexagonal, just like the hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn, ironically. All right, you have two shells, two shells, two shells. 2 times 3, 6. Okay, so you have 6 right there. You add these 3 other elements, silver, gold, and aluminum. That equals 6 elements. So you have 6, 6, and when you add these shells up, you get 14. Okay, and then 5 plus 1, or 4 plus 1 equals 5. All right, that's a clue to the the last and most important element, which would be pure silicon or quartz. 14 right there. And then you do the math on that. 5, 10, 15. 5 plus 1 equals 6. That would be the third 6. 6, 6, 6. I believe that this machine was the beast. Or technically, 666 is a carbon molecule, and that we're carbon-based life forms. We are the beast, but this is his tool. This gives him the power, or a godlike power, which he could technically abuse and abuse others. Now, on the molecular structure, from these first 3, you're going to get a triforce. When you incorporate the other 3, you end up with Metatron's cube, the forbidden geometric shape. Now, why is it forbidden? Well, I never knew until I figured this out. And this is the reason. Now, if you're going to have a triangle building, you're going to have trigonal molecules to make it work. And you're going to have to incorporate special or precious elements and the best properties of those elements. Now, here's the molecular geometry. And they're either bipyramidal or pyramidal structures, which ultimately equal Metatron's cube at the end. And Metatron's cube is more or less a hexagon, which water tends to create. Now, these pyramids were a gift to the Nile. And if you have fluorine, now we use fluoride in our water to purify it. Now, if you are using fluorine to power the pyramid, then the pyramid is going to be a gift to the Nile, because it is a gift to the Nile, and I believe it had something to do with cleansing the water. And if you do this wrong, you're going to cause plagues, and you can have hydrochloric acid or hydrofluoric gas, basically, that can poison people. And it can get in the water supply if you do it wrong, and you can cause plagues. Animals are going to end up jumping out of the water, the plagues of frogs, the bugs, and people dying, burns on their bodies, whelps, blisters, and stuff like that. And I believe that's why there was so much controversy over this machine, because Moses did not want, or Moses had knowledge from a higher power, technically telling him, don't let that man get that thing running, because it's going to end up causing problems. And I'm just getting a little biblical because it kind of makes sense, just ironically. I mean, it's forbidden knowledge, and the Illuminati or Annuit Septus, we were watching you on the back of the dollar bill. I believe they know what this thing does, and they have actually suppressed this. And the Knights Templar and all them, it's all been a big cover-up, basically. And, they've leaked out certain things in movies over the years that indicate to me, because certain movies started popping in my head, like The Fifth Element, because technically you're going to be creating plasma in the King's Chamber, which is the fourth state of matter, or the fifth element, which is ironic. See, like I said, if you're using a pyramid, you're going to have to use trigonal or pyramidal molecules to line everything up with nature, natural, in harmony with everything, like all the measurements and everything. It's all lined up perfectly with nature. All right, now, the subterranean chamber. Imagine you have a cathode and anode down here, and salt water as an electrolyte. Well, you use selenite, all right? Selenite or sodium, whatever, it's actually a trigonal molecule also. But now we know lithium fluoride, or lithium fluorine, whatever, it creates UV. We use it in UV lights. And like I said, everything feeds its feeder. It all works in a circle. So when you got a machine turning another machine, the machine that it's turning is actually feeding the other one, like an electric motor and a generator hooked up to one another, like you see in these Vimanas, ironically. And the selenite or the fluorine is going to create salts in the subterranean chamber, which is technically going to feed it some more. And that's why the Grand Gallery represents a light prism. Now, I believe these helped accelerate light or photons, electrons, whatever, and put it through the quartz tablets to create positronium, but I'll show you that here in a second. Now consider they use things in a circle, like the circle of life, and they don't let anything go to waste. Now imagine their piping or hoses is actually wiring also. So they can actually charge something or create a current and transfer the current while actually transferring something through that also. And it's basically like a hollow wire with a charge to it. Okay? Now the gases are going to end up coming up through here. And the current is going to come through here and from here and go through the hall here. Okay? And you'll get a light prism. Now if this if it represents a person, like this is the carotid artery, and this is the pituitary gland, and the King's Chamber is the thalamus, like this here. Now, the pituitary gland helps you grow, okay? Now, the carotid artery obviously feeds your brain oxygen and blood, all right? So this is where you would get the oxygen and blood. It would be pumped through, okay? So the gases and the UV light is being created in this subterranean chamber. And the gases move up through here, and the light comes up through here, and you get the light prism, all right? Now, as the gases move through here, more end up, basically this helps it grow. Now this could either be more fluorine or another element. I'm not exactly sure. I'm figuring it's probably a fluorine, a big giant fluorine tablet or something along those sorts, lithium, whatever. But regardless, what it's doing is it's helping this grow. It's helping the gases grow and they're being fed into the king's chamber. Now, as the light or photons are shot through the quartz crystal, it ends up going into a capacitor, which arcs, lighting up these ionized gases. Now you're getting the spark of life in the king's chamber. This is where the star is going to be ignited. And as the pituitary gland releases growth hormone for us, this queen's chamber would be a lot cooler, actually, than this chamber also. The temperature differences vary, and the humidity and temperature actually plays a role in helping these elements react, or at least the fluorine, because fluorine is a very, very reactive substance, a very reactive element. In fact, it's the most reactive element we have. And this is the core energy that creates the main computing in a processor, and it's a microstar. And ironically, we have motherboards with the brand Microstar. How ironic is that? Now, we suspect that they used mirrors to reflect light, but I believe that's actually partially true. I don't believe it was actually mirrors, or it could have been very, very polished mirrors, or it could have been quartz crystal. But regardless, there was UV that was created from here, or light came into this, and it went through here. And that's why we get the light prism. And if you shine a light through a prism, you get this. It expands. I mean, you get the rainbow, obviously. So it's like the light is being inputted through here, and then it's spreading. But they used it to ignite this. Now, aluminum plays a big part in this. Now, imagine this whole surface is aluminum. Now, that's going to pull in a lot of static energy from the atmosphere and be able to harness it and focus it. Also, it'd be pulling in a lot of heat. Now, I know it wasn't a desert back then, because I believe this thing is actually over 10,000 years old, just as Graham Hancock theorizes. But regardless, whether it's a desert or not, you're still going to gather some heat or energy. And the limestone or calcium and the granite actually transfer heat via thermoelectric conduction. Okay? So this is a giant thermoelectric generator also. Now, the COSO artifact looks like a spark plug because a spark plug is an arc light. And arc light technology has been around for thousands of years. And this, the Ark of the Covenant, is actually an arc light. The Ark of the Covenant, obviously, it's got a hot and a ground coming off the top. And it's a condenser, so whenever it gets power, it arcs. Now, you're going to have a positive and negative up in the top of the king's chamber. These pillars, imagine this is a positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative up through here, okay? This is going to help create a magnetism to help this plasma and this star burn like a wick. This would be technically the anode, another anode. There's a cathode and anode in the subterranean chamber, then there's another anode here. And this, it's like a wick lamp. Imagine a lamp. Look up designs of lamps on the internet. You'll see that they resemble this a great deal, which is ironic, because this lights a star. Now, once the particles come up through here and they shoot through the grain gallery or the great hall, whatever, they're going to come through here, and this would be like a carbon filament. Now, the filament would stay heated, or it would help charge or push these protons or the electrons through the plates. Now, you would have a carbon, and once electrons go through carbon, they spread out. When they go through quartz, they realign. So, however the configuration, like say there was a quartz tablet here and one over here right before the arc, okay? And in between those, there was the carbon. So, you would get the harnessed electrons, they would shoot through that, they would spread, then they would realign straight into the condenser. Now, there could be maybe just one quartz tablet or two, regardless the configuration, but nonetheless, you're shooting electrons straight into a condenser. Now, when I say it's going to shoot electrons, people would think, oh man, that's too high tech. No, not really. An electron gun is a very simple device. It's basically a heater, an anode, and a cathode. You got basically one cathode and two anodes and a heater. That's it. The heater is basically the source. This is basically a simple electron gun, or CRT. They're in every cathode ray television that ever existed. Basically, there's a heater, a cathode, an anode, and an anode. And you're going to basically direct it with directing plates. The plates are going to help it direct the electrons straight to the picture tube, okay? Now, when you consider this being an anode, and a cathode and an anode down here, you pretty much have everything you need for an electron gun. And no thing. Ain't no thing. Now imagine you shoot the electrons through a quartz plate, a carbon plate, then a quartz plate. The quartz, it's going to align the electrons. They're going to focus them. It's going to focus them. Then it's going to spread them through the carbon. Then they're going to realign straight into the condenser. Or it could just go through the carbon and spread, and then through the quartz and condense. However the configuration. But regardless, quartz and carbon are very important to create this antimatter, or antimatter in the antechamber. How fitting that it's called the antechamber. So you're lighting up the ionized gases with that exotic spark. So when you have ionized gases, you have an exotic gas. And with an exotic spark, you're going to create a star. Now, you can create an explosion, a giant explosion, but you have to have that magnetic field set into place when you start this. So technically, we have the elements to make an electron gun, and we have the elements to create ionized gases. And we have the elements to create antimatter. Now, consider the parts. A hot, or a ground, a hot, and another hot. Then you have a deflecting plate, maybe right here or maybe through here. There's missing pieces, obviously. But when you put the pieces into place, this would be what you get, in my opinion. Now, this is a thermoelectric generator, which ironically looks like the Ark of the Covenant, which ironically would fit in the coffer, too. The dimensions are proper, which is amazing. Now, imagine once this thing gets its charge from the antimatter or positronium and it arcs, it's going to fire up the star, okay? Now, flip this around, the heat source up here and the cool source down here, or the cool side down here. Now, it doesn't matter which is which, as long as you have a hot side and a cold side. It's almost like a Stirling engine, okay? Now, like I said, everything feeds itself in a circle, okay? So this star is being fed by this capacitor, and this capacitor is being fed by the star, because the heat from the star is helping this keep it arced. Now, if this is in the coffer, imagine there might be some kind of gel or something in it keeping this end cool. Now, ironically, we can make thermoelectric generator out of computer parts. Oh, I'll show you another socket. Check it out. Persepolis. Look. I wonder what socket these gigantic CPU pyramids were. I bet they could find it out. I bet they count the pins. Now, ironically, I'm just going to show you this. Okay? On the bottom of a CPU, the older CPUs anyway, we have pins. See? There's pins that go down into the socket. Okay? These are the pins. So the pyramid would actually be the female, while these are the male. Whereas, on these computer parts, on this AM2 processor, this is the male, and this is the female. Now imagine this with the polarity to it, and an ionized beam or star just right here directing a current directly into the air, ionizing heating up the ionosphere, like HARP does. Basically, here's an electron gun. There's nothing to it. That's all the parts that this has. Alright, here's a thermoelectric generator someone made out of a heat sink and a fan. And the fan would turn from the power that it creates from itself, basically. So, the circle of life. You're always recycling energy. You never let anything go to waste. So how ironic is that? That's another coincidental thing. See, how ironic is this? Osirian, Egypt, computer chip, computer motherboard, Mayan pyramids. I mean, that's just, it's too amazing. It's macrotechnology. It's just a large scale. I mean, it's all semiconductor chips. They're monolithic circuits. Now, how amazing is that? We got something called a monolithic circuit. See, these were basically just thermoelectric generators, and they ended up creating a magnetic field. Once you put the guts in them and all their stuff, incorporate all the materials back into them, they'll create a magnetic field which would help harness this star. And I would say that there are definitely a lot of subterranean tunnels under Giza, which they either haven't discovered or they are hiding. But it's like the solder joints and all the little highways on a motherboard that connect. Now, like I said, they're 6,666 kilometers apart, right? But when you multiply that times 12, the signs of the zodiac, you get the circumference of the planet. And that's why I believe that Atlantis was actually in the Pacific Ocean. Because when you're in second, third grade, you look at a map and you see the planets or the continents, how they look like they fit together like a puzzle from continental drift. You can see where most of the landmass is there. But if you're in the United States, on the west coast in the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot of landmass that's missing or underwater. And that's where I believe Atlantis was. And through the thousands and thousands of years, it's just gotten confused or switched around or maybe even purposely distorted to help or, to prevent people from catching on and discovering this stuff, to keep this power suppressed. I mean, this machine contributed to the demise of Atlantis, and there's always the myth that they were messing with the weather manipulation, yada, 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 and they sank their island. Well, this would totally coincide with that. Now, the Knights Templar played a big part in this to locate all of the artifacts and suppress them, hide them, whatever, to keep this from getting out. And burning people as witches, and I don't believe they were actually killed and burnt as heretics or witches themselves. I think that was a story they started to kind of kill themselves off, to basically kind of hide themselves out, more or less. Now, the Bermuda Triangle, there was probably a small island, kind of like Easter Island, that was there. That maybe that was Atlantis. But to be a continent, it would have to be on the other side, in the Pacific Ocean. Because this would be island size, and in the Pacific Ocean, that would be continent size. But nonetheless, this could have been kind of like a small island that they had something on, and it went down, and it's still under the water, causing magnetic fluctuations that mess with our instruments. Now, imagine this in the King's Chamber, and you have the north, the south of the positive, negative, and you have hydrogen and a magnetic field in this. Now, if this was encased with aluminum, now you would have your hot junction point right here, all right? And here's what the military uses. Now imagine this is aluminum instead of iron. And upside down, this would be the top of the pyramid. And this would be the hot junction point, like you would have right here. So it would get energy from the sun and put it through here, which would shoot through the grain gallery with the light. And ironically, see, you would have to use aluminum because aluminum has a very low magnetic interaction. So that way, whenever you create your high magnetic field to harness the star, it doesn't interact with the pyramid's surface. So it's absorbing heat and using the heat transfer from the surface to the subsurface and creating a current, generating a power, keeping the building charged. Because calcium or limestone and granite are actually perfect electromagnetic conduction or thermoelectric conductors. So it's ironic how much like a thermoelectric generator this actually is. Yep, more thermoelectric generators. Now, doesn't that look familiar? Stonehenge, Roman numerals, the wheels inside wheels with the spokes that went in any four directions or whatever. Or it moved in any four direction with the spokes and all that. Regardless. Now look at this. This will blow your mind. Bam. You know what that is? Looks like a medallion, doesn't it? Or a meter on your electric pole. That is the Roman Colosseum. Imagine these being capacitor plates and certain electrical currents that are produced that create a gigantic amount of power. Imagine Stonehenge being this big. Look at these thermoelectric generators. Now look at this. I mean, obviously, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you can't deny this. I'm just going to throw this out there. See, this temple here? Looks a lot like a video card to me. This right here is a servo motor. How ironic is that? See, this is a coil gun. Just a simple coil gun. See, look at that. That's why I believe that this was almost like a coil gun or electron gun. It ended up deflecting the current or power, electrons, whatever, light, photons, through here at a phenomenal speed into a plate, which created antimatter, which arced it up. See, there's just a lot of stuff missing. It's been pillaged and stripped over the 10 millennia that it's been around, because I believe that the Roman gods, Zeus, Poseidon, all of them, I believe all of the far ancients, they were the ones that built this stuff. It was more or less the Mesopotamians. Look at this. Thermoelectric generator right there. And these are torches or fire. This is the hot side, this is the cool side. And here are the thermoelectric legs. See, here's a homemade servo motor that someone made. See, it's like an electric motor, but it's just configured different. The magnets and coils are configured differently. Now, these gigantic spheres that they don't know where they came from or what they are technically, I believe they were actually bearings for certain machines like this. But they created these giant, hard bearings, and the machine themselves are gone now. Or were destroyed. I'm just throwing this in here. Looks like a fidget spinner, doesn't it? That's why I was saying on one post that they're just making a joke out of everyone. They're putting stuff right out in the open and nobody's even putting it together, and they're just laughing at us. I'm just going to throw this in here too. Just ironically, how it's talking about the ether and the Earth's magnetic field and the energy that it uses. Of course, this is part of it, but there's a lot more to it. But this is just ironic how this fits in there perfectly also. Now here's Angkor Watt. Now what is a watt? It's a unit of power that we use, or measure of power. So look at this. Notice the resemblance. This looks like Solomon's temple, to be quite honest. See, this is the court of the Gentiles. See, another circuit here. Pretty amazing. Motherboard. Of course, it looks like one of the megaliths. Look at this. There's no doubt in my mind that these were just giant circuits. Macrotechnology. Mayan pyramid from the top. Look at this. This is a circuit. It's pretty amazing to me. See, check this out. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that this was just macrotechnology. And they used it to harness energy to give themselves power to be quote-unquote gods. Now check out, not just the circle here, but imagine a positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, and this is shooting an ionized beam straight up. Or a star straight, right here in the middle. But look, all these little highways. If they would excavate this more, they would find out that there's actually pyramid sockets here too, I'd say. I don't doubt it one bit. Look, this looks like, almost like it's complete semiconductors. It's a circuit here. So here's a thermoelectric generator here. Looks like a Mayan pyramid to me. And check out Mohenjo-Daro. See, all of these would create a magnetic field to keep this star or this energy from blowing up or expanding, and it keep it focused and harnessed. Now here we have a Tesla coil, or a coil gun, Wardenclyffe Tower, and Egyptian scepters, or towers of some sort. This is what they use for the transferring heavy stones, basically. Anti-gravity formula, more or less. Look how much that resembles the Tesla coil. Tesla definitely knew what they were doing and what they did, how they did it. And he was put down for it. See, look at Leyden jars. They knew what electricity was. Now this guy's cooking. He's cooking his food with his hands. Like monks can heat up certain things, and like that show that Stan Lee, where he's looking for the superheroes, the guy that can conduct electricity. This is the symbol for power or electricity or energy. Every time the gods have it, they have this in their hands. And of course there's other things. I would say what this energy is, but people would think I'm an idiot for mentioning it. But it's a lot more powerful than people give it credit for, because it's laid off like a joke. A lot of people might know what that is, but I want people to take this serious, so I'm not going to say it. But nonetheless, it's free moving electrons, if that tells you anything. Now, they always had conductive material all over their body to help this energy, to conduct it, so they would have this power. See, imagine these thermoelectric legs, or regardless, there would be a charge in this building, or there would be coils, inductors, and wiring, regardless, electrical equipment. And they would harness this power and distribute it to all the quote-unquote gods, like Zeus with his lightning bolt, and Poseidon with his Triton. Now, Moses parted the water because he lifted his staff that was highly polarized. And you can push water with a magnetic field because it's diamagnetism. And when he lifted his staff and walked into the water, it just flowed around him. And like I said, if you don't know what you're doing and you try to operate this thing, because of the fluorine, you can create hydrofluoric acid. And you can kill people, and you can create swarms of animal wildlife. Basically, they'll swarm up on you like the plagues, because it was connected to the Nile River, because it was the gift to the Nile. And I believe, like I said, it cleansed the water somehow. At the same time, the Nile produced current for the pyramid. Now, a lot of people would say these are probably stands right here, but I think these were actually coils that helped push the power or harness the energy and put it through the building. Or in this case, through this man's, or this so-called God's chair. And I think these actually, with everything considering and knowing a little about circuitry and electronics and current and stuff myself, like this represents water. What is water? Water, well, is current. I think this actually represents current more or less than water. And I think these are actually electrical diagrams. Like, say, this would be the formula, the electrical circuitry for a certain building. This would be a different building, and this one right here would be a different building. And it would basically tell you, or more or less give you the instructions of how it operates. See, this right here, I think, is a thermoelectric generator also. These are maybe Clarksdorp spheres also that would be heat sinks. And this right here would be a lamp that would be heating this up. And he's cooking his food on top of it. Or it creates some, or he's actually using electrical current. Almost like we would use a microwave. Except for he's using electrical current and maybe cooking his food. It's just a theory, but it makes some wild sense. See, here's an Ankh. This represents the power that they have in their hands. And I think this energy, more or less, not necessarily they don't necessarily have elongated skulls, but I believe their hair is actually standing up. And I'm just go ahead and say static energy is very powerful. I'm just go ahead and say it, static energy. Okay? And these, like I said, depict diagrams or electrical diagrams of buildings and certain devices that they had. Now, I believe this was probably some kind of anti-gravity plate right here. And this right here would be a capacitor. But it would be a bipolar capacitor of some sort. A transistor. See, like you got a positive, a negative, and a positive. Or it'd be a supercapacitor. And it would direct current into this plate, which this plate would make an electromagnetic cushion. And that would be the anti-gravity. Now, 369, now this would be kind of like an example of the anti-gravity formula. 369, Roman numerals, okay? like a thermoelectric generator. You'd have the positive, negative, but this would be like a diode that directs energy straight down, and this would direct it straight down into this plate, which would create some kind of magnetic cushion right here. Okay. Now, there would probably be a little more to it, actually, but this would be the basic, simple design, easy way to explain it. See, this is the symbol for direction of current. This is like a diode, basically, and it directs current one single way. That way, any electrons can't make any kind of backwards motion. All of the energy is focused one direction. So you would have this energy being focused into this plate, which would create the magnetic cushion. Now, like I said, this could all be a theory, but it's definitely in the right direction. Now, I'm no mathematician. All I know is basically add, subtract, divide, multiply, decimals, and fractions. The basics and equations, but not when it gets to the real crazy equations. So basically, you have a cathode and anode, and another anode, and a capacitor. You have fluorine and lithium, and carbon up here in this anode chamber here, okay? You create the gases and the light. You pull in energy from here, you pull in energy from here, you direct it straight through here. The gases grow and perpetuate. You ignite the gases, just like you would a cigarette lighter, with an arc light, and a star is created. A star is lit. But, like I said, the magnetic field must be in place first. Now, when the Israelites seized the Ark of the Covenant and opened it, not the Israelites, the Philistines, they started dying. And anyone that came in contact with the Ark of the Covenant, basically, their hair would fall out, and they'd pretty much get radiation sickness, implying that there was probably uranium or plutonium or something inside it. Now, when you consider incorporating certain materials, elements, and basically with this design and incorporating these materials, putting them in certain places, you can use very small ounces of uranium to produce thousands of degrees of power. Now, this would burn probably anywhere from 1100 to 3100 degrees, all right? Now, in our nuclear reactors, we have tons of uranium, and we're burning maybe 400 or 500 degrees, which is ridiculous. So we're using tons of poison to get hundreds of degrees when we can use ounces of it with other materials and methods to create thousands of degrees of power. That's a very good increase there. I mean, that's revolutionary. So here's another Egyptian hieroglyph, which ironically looks a lot like a Hall-Heroult cell, and the Hall-Heroult cell ironically looks a lot like the antechamber. There's some more hieroglyphs, and ironically this looks like the core of a transformer, and this looks like a capacitor plates. So this is an electrical diagram of something. I'm sure of it. Now, ironically, I'm just going to throw this out there. If there was one of these plants on each side of the planet, and they were active, that means the planet would flash twice every 24 hours, which would, in turn, make Earth a beacon. Now, just to throw this out there also, in the Sirius constellation, there's this hypothetical or theoretical, and maybe even real, a planet called Xylanthia. Now, it happens to be 8 light years away. That means like the 7 years of tribulation more or less would take place, and then on the 8th year, whatever lives on that planet would be summoned to this planet by that beacon to probably tell us, hey, shut that thing down. You're going to end up killing yourselves and causing a cataclysm. Now, that's just a theory. I've stumbled across it and figured I'd throw it out there for anyone that might kind of find that interesting. See, the fact that it's dead center in the middle of the landmass means that it's actually spinning the fastest that it can possibly spin. Because Earth spins roughly 1,000 miles per hour, and it spins the fastest at the equator because that's the widest area of the circumference of the planet. So spinning around the planet, more or less, or spinning along with Earth at 1,000 miles per hour, it's gathering up and pulling in a lot of static energy from the surface of the planet, from the atmosphere, and using equipotential lines, because the higher you get, the more power you get. So whenever this is moving, basically whenever this is rotating, the atmosphere is feeding it energy. Let's see. Whenever the particles come through here, this capacitor gets charged and it sparks. And it arcs. And it lights up all of this gas. And these poles here, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, is a magnetism that helps keep this from blowing up. And it actually helps direct ionized energy into the atmosphere. And ironically, the Sphinx's temple, I believe, was the main control room, and it's the only one that's been destroyed. And I think it was destroyed to keep this plant from operating. And how are you going to do that? Well, you can preserve the building and keep the functions a secret and just destroy the head control room while leaving it in place and making sure it never functions again. Unless someone catches on and figures out what it does. I think that's why the Sphinx is facing that building, and it's the only one destroyed. And these buildings are giant transistors, circuits, no more, no less. And since there's a star in this chamber, you're going to have a magnetic field, like I said, around it, harnessing it. And that's what I believe all of these buildings were. They were producing current, or in a magnetism, that helped focus this energy and keep the pyramid from blowing up. And these boat pits were probably some sort of diodes or crystal or quartz, more or less, or some kind of piezoelectric stone. Well, it would have to be quartz, more or less, but because of its special properties. But nonetheless, I believe that's what these buildings were around this for, is to help harness it. So I believe this machine would actually create quite a bit of ozone. And that's one thing that contributed to atmospheric changes. And roughly, one idea is one went down and one was still operating, which pushed the planet slightly, causing a polar shift and a cataclysm. And once there were survivors, everything kind of, the smoke cleared, the survivors started the machine up again, fixed everything, and then 1,400 years later, however, another cataclysm hit, and that probably had something to do with the ozone layer. They thickened it up, whatever, and it caused another cataclysm. Now, since you have 10 points, the 10 kingdoms of the Antichrist, or just throwing that out there, you'll see 5 and 10 pop up quite a bit. Now, like I was saying, with these being transistors, or, well, transistors and circuits, and the hieroglyphs, for instance, those hieroglyphs would probably say, maybe one of them would be a set of symbols that represent this building. And the current comes in, and there's transformers here. It's directed through coils, through arcs, which in turn pushes current through here. It amplifies, comes through here, goes eventually from the mortuary or from the temple into the pyramid. The pyramid increases the energy. It sends it to the middle pyramid, or it starts in the middle pyramid and spreads out to the other ones, creating a field and energy. Nonetheless, it looks just like a circuit. But I say they would use silver instead of copper for the wiring, because it's a precious metal which actually conducts electricity a lot better than copper. And the Egyptians stumbled across these plants, dug them up, and stripped them of their precious materials, and that's why they had so much gold and so many items that they had made out of these precious elements. Because, I mean, they didn't actually have to go and produce it or manufacture it themselves. They just dug it up and pillaged it. So it really didn't have as much value to them as it would us today. Granted, it had some value, but it wasn't as valuable because they just found it. The gold would be the Ark of the Covenant. The quartz would be the plates. See, look, you could see where it would look. It looks as if it would actually direct current. And you can see where it looks like there may have been coils or capacitor plates in certain areas. And the carbon is the filament that, or the anode, that's in the antechamber that helps burn as a lamp would. Now you have to understand microtechnology or computers a little, electricity, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, astrophysics, molecular physics. But I explained it rather simple. But this is the design I came up with, the cold fission generator. More or less, it's like the pyramid. It functions the same way, and ironically, it looks like the Wardenclyffe Tower or one of these scepters that they had in their hands. Now, I probably should patent this first before I put it out there, but I got a lot more inventions and stuff that maybe one of these days I'll be able to patent, like my the first fully functioning true human android, which would totally revolutionize our society. But nonetheless, you have UV and power being produced down here. Now this would be where the fluorine and lithium is, and you're creating the gas. And it's more or less an electron gun. Now it shoots through these plates like you would have, just like the pyramid would do. The electrons, it shoots through the plates, and it creates an arc, which creates a star, more or less. And these would represent the king's chamber, or your lungs, more or less, and or the queen's chamber, and this would be where the gases expand or perpetuate. I mean, they grow, and it would be pretty much pressurized. It would start building up a lot of pressure. And the pressure would, of course, help it. But you're shooting electrons through here. More or less, it'd be like a giant cigarette lighter. Imagine this as being like a giant cigarette lighter. You got your fuel coming from here. You got electrons shooting through here, charging this capacitor, which arcs and creates a star. And this is where your electromagnet, or your magnetism, or your magnetic field is, to keep this thing from blowing up. But you would have to have some sort of mica or lead, more or less, to protect you from radiation. And like I said, I mean, a lot of people are on the right track, but nobody really gives these people the credit that they deserve, because they surpassed us, and we got to actually get our heads out of our asses and consider that is a great possibility. That these people, we cannot replicate what they did, so they had to have surpassed us somehow. But they used their technology in a different way. But like I was saying, this would represent how it works. You're getting a charge into this capacitor of positronium. Half matter, half antimatter, more or less. I mean, and you're sparking up a flame. I mean, this is why arc lights are so important, because the COSO artifact looks like a spark plug or an arc light, because this technology has been around for thousands of years, if not millions of years. Now here's a good depiction here. And I believe this is actually the formula that creates this. Now it looks like a plasma ball. Now this could be a coil right here. And these could be thermoelectric legs. Or this could be basically what this formula is. It's saying there's transformer here, there's a capacitor here, there's a amplifier here, another transformer maybe, a coil here, and yada yada yada. And it creates light or energy or plasma, power, whatever you want to call it. See, there's the power Thoth has in his hand. He's, I guess, given this power to this god here, or this man, whatever, regular guy, god, whatever. I mean, but here's some more electrical diagrams. See, I showed you this earlier, but obviously, of course, there's this infamous picture. You can't deny that that's not a transformer or a capacitor of some sort. I mean, it's completely obvious. Even my kids believe this guy's got a light bulb, and they're 5 and 4 years old. I mean, they even think he's got a flashlight. You can't deny that. That's completely obvious. Why can't people admit it? I mean, all it's doing is holding us back. I mean, we could actually learn from these people, but this is what's hidden in the Vatican. So here's the Stela, or the Rudi, the Sphinxes. This right here would be capacitors. And one on each side of the planet. So here we go again. it would only make sense that this is what's actually under the Sphinx. When you go into the top of the Sphinx or whatever, actually there's a picture, there's a video, Bright Insight, very, very smart man. He can open your eyes to a lot of stuff too on YouTube. Look him up. But you can go into the Sphinx, and that's probably either the Sphinx's temple is where you started this machine up, or you go down in here and you start it up. Regardless, you can go into the Sphinx. It's actually not solid all the way through. See, back at this one, this would be like the spokes, but this would shoot some kind of pure ionizing beam, or like a star. But you would have transformers and circuits, coils. I mean, this is a giant circuit, but you'd have coils and polarity, north, south, going through this. If you actually incorporate all the material that's basically been flooded, washed away, rotted back into the earth, and pillaged over the thousands of years. I mean, this just tells me that's why the Karnak stones, Giza, and all of these megaliths, they actually have current to them. They actually have some kind of magnetism. The stones retained that. Either they've retained it because they were functioning for so long, thousands of years probably before the cataclysms hit, or there's still some material inside them, because they're basically semiconductors. And there's still material inside them that are retaining that energy, more or less. And because of the Earth's magnetism, because they used the Earth, everything was in harmony with the Earth and the planet, molecular structures, all of it. See, they just did this stuff on a larger scale to achieve something that we take as a joke or don't even consider. Or it's suppressed because we don't need power like this in our hands, because we're too irresponsible. Like I said, the man is beast. Man is the beast, and this is his tool. And he used it to do things that he shouldn't have. Probably abused people, power that mankind does not need. See, here's a CRT, or an electron gun. There's nothing to it. You got a heater, first and second anodes, vertical and horizontal deflecting plates. And this is all the tubes, so this technically, we wouldn't even have this in it. We would just have, the control grid. Well, that's where you're shooting out the power. But you can deflect the electrons however you want. So if they were trying to deflect them from the subterranean chamber into the king's chamber,